Welcome to Automation of the Week. My name is Brian Hayes. Every Tuesday, we release another video showing you step by step how to build out an automation to improve your business. This week, I'm going to show you how you can insert details from a related list into an email template. This is a solution that has a lot of different use cases and in some respects is a missing feature within Salesforce. Now, the way you can do this currently is with a custom Apex class and using a Visualforce email template, but most people don't have the time to learn how to build those things out. So what I'm going to show you today is how to use Flow to get to the same thing. Essentially, what we're going to do is use Flow to build out an HTML list that we can then save to a field on our record, which we can then reference in an email template. So the goal here is to get to the solution with as little coding as possible. We've just got a couple HTML tags that I'll show you as we go through the video. Let's get started building out this solution. The first thing we want to do is create a rich text field so that we can save the list that we're going to build through our flow and then insert into email templates. What I'm going to do for our use case here is create a list of the contacts related to an account so that I can then easily email somebody and say, here are all of the contacts that we have underneath your account. But you could use this to email somebody a list of cases or a list of opportunities, or any other custom object that you have in the system. So to start, I'm going to create a field on my account object because that's where I want this list of data to exist that'll insert into emails. Let's do that. Click the gear in the upper right-hand corner and click Edit Object. And then under Fields and Relationships, click New. Here we can create a rich text field. If you're going to be sending this email through Salesforce, rich text seems to be the best. If you're going to send this email through Pardot, it's actually better to use a plain text area field because that can sync with Pardot. Pardot doesn't have the ability to sync rich text fields currently. I'm going to use the rich text field and then click Next. I'm going to call this Contact List and I'm going to expand the size of this field to our maximum. Keep in mind, this will be a limitation. You only have 131,000 characters for this field. If you have a list that is larger than that, it's going to be cut off at some point. Then click Next. I'm going to provide the default access to these different profiles. And then under Page Layouts, I am going to add it to the layouts, but typically I wouldn't. Normally people don't need to see this field. It's really just going to be used in emails. But for the purpose of our testing, to show you how it works, I'll leave it on the layout. Then click Save. Now we've got a rich text field on our account. The next step is to create a flow that will build out our HTML list, or you could do this with a table as well, and insert it into that field. To do that, let's go down to Flows and create a new one. We've got a few choices for types of flows here, and what I'm going to show you could work with a record-triggered flow, a screen flow, a schedule-triggered flow. So because of that, I'm actually going to create an auto-launch flow with no trigger, because then I could start that flow through any of these other means of triggers. It all depends on when you want to send out this email. If this is an email that goes out on a regular basis, well, then a schedule triggered flow would be ideal because you could have this flow run an hour before you're going to send out the email and you'll have the most up-to-date HTML list on your record. If this is an infrequent email, then a screen flow might be better because then we could create a button on the record to click that. The flow runs, it builds the list, and then it triggers the email to be sent. And then a record-triggered flow could be good if this just needs to be generated when a record hits a certain stage. Like maybe when an account becomes a customer, that's when you'd want this to run and build out that contact list. So I've just selected auto-launched flow. The first thing I'm going to do on the left-hand side is create a new resource here. It's going to be a variable for our record ID. Because really, I'm assuming that I'm running this for a specific account. So I want to pass that account ID into this flow, whether that's coming from a button, from a screen flow, or coming from a record-triggered flow, etc. Our data type here will be text. I'm going to make this available for input, and then click Done. We've got our record ID. This is our account ID. The next thing we need to do is to get all of the contacts that we want to use to build out our list. So I'm going to add a get record step. And this might be get cases or get opportunities, whatever you need for your particular use case. I'll choose contact here. And then for our contact records, we only want the contacts whose account ID is equal to our record ID. If we don't put this condition here, then we're going to be getting all the contacts in the entire system, which obviously we do not want. That would be far too many. You could add additional conditions if you'd like. Perhaps you only want to include contacts with a certain title, or you only want to include opportunities are closed or cases that are still currently open. You've got that option here just by adding additional conditions. Last option here at the bottom is to include all records, not just the first record. And I'm going to store all the fields just so that we have them available within this flow. Click Done. The next thing we'll do is add a loop. This loop is going to let us go through each of the contacts individually, and that's how we're going to build out our HTML list. Go ahead and give this loop a name and then choose the collection from our last get step. If you don't see a collection variable here, it's probably because you didn't update that get step to get all records and not just the first one. Now that we have a loop, we can create an assignment step to essentially build out our list line by line. Let's do that by adding an element here for assignment. I'm going to call this add HTML row to list, but you could also have this be add HTML row to a table. I'm using an unordered list as our example today just because it's simpler HTML, but the principle is exactly the same if you wanted to do this with a table with multiple fields instead of just a list. For a variable, we'll create a text variable that is going to house our finished HTML list. And then for our value, we'll create a text template, which has the code for just this row that's going to get added to that unordered list. Under variables, create new resource, select variable. I'm going to call this variable contact list, and the data type will be text. For the default value here, I'm going to put the very first HTML element for our unordered list. It's just the less than sign, UL, and then the greater than sign. And let me show you an example of what we're trying to get at. Here's an example of an unordered list in HTML. You can see it starts with the UL, it ends with the closing element for UL, and then for each item, we have LI, which stands for list item, and then the content is in between those two list item elements. This is what we're going to build in our flow. If you wanted to do this with a table, you can see right above here, we've got HTML tables as an example. And you can reference the HTML here, very similar, just a little bit more complicated than our unordered list example. Okay, we'll come back here. We're going to start with UL, hit done. And then instead of the operator being equals, we're going to add more code to that opening element. And then for the value here, let's create a text template because it's a little bit easier to see what's happening. I'm going to call this text template a list row. And then under the body here, make sure that this is in plain text by clicking that button in the upper right-hand corner. And here we can add our list item elements. So there's our opening one, and there's our closing. Zoom in a little bit for you there. And whatever we write in here is going to be the content of that list item. And where it says insert resource, we can select that, and we can choose current item from loop. Under current item from loop, we can choose any of these field values from our contact record. And it's from this particular contact record that's in the loop, because the loop's going to go through it over and over again, and it'll do this again for each one of the contacts that's related to that account. Let's add first name. And then I also want to add last name. So we'll do this again, current item from loop, search for last name here. Excellent. If you wanted to, we could even put in a comma, and we could add their title too. Why not? Add title. Click done. And now what we're doing is we're taking that line of code, that row from the list, and we're adding it to our contact list, which started with our UL tag. Click done. This will loop through as many times as it needs to. And then after the loop, we want to add another assignment step to close out our unordered list. Assignment, close list. For our variable, we're still going to use our contact list variable. Our operator will still be add. And then the value that we're going to add is our closing unordered list tag. It's pretty simple, so I'm just going to write it in there. Click done. The reason why we're doing that is because we want our final HTML code to look just like this so that it's proper, it's not broken in any way. Final step here is to update our account. Add an update step, update account, and we're going to specify conditions to identify the records and set the fields manually. The object that we want to update, of course, is an account, and we want the account whose ID is equal to the record ID. And then for our field here, we want to update our contact list field. There it is. That's the one that we created at the beginning of the tutorial, and we can add our contact list variable as the value. So we're taking our contact list variable where we've built out that HTML unordered list, and we're going to now update the account with it. And click Done. Click Save and name your flow. I'm calling this account-create HTML list of contacts, and hit Save. Let's debug this and see how it runs. So in order to debug this flow, we need to pass a record ID into it. We can get that by coming to one of our example accounts here and copying that ID from the URL. Paste that into record ID and hit Run. On the right-hand side, you can see it looping through each contact and then finally updating that account. Hit refresh on your account record, scroll down, and there is our contact list right there with each contact that's related to this account and their title right next to their name. Now that we have this HTML list, we can insert it into an email template like any other field. Let me show you how that would work. Pull up your email templates in Salesforce. We'll create a new email template here, and we'll call this contact list email. Our related entity will be an account, because that's where our field is. Under HTML here, we've got our merge fields in the lower right-hand corner, and under account, we can insert our contact list. Click Insert here. Let's add a line right above it and click Save. Let's come back to this account and let's say we're going to send them an email. I'm going to insert the template we just created, account-contact list. Click Insert. And to preview this, you can hit the little I in the lower left-hand corner, and this is the email that's going to be sent out. Here's all the contacts we have associated with your account, and then there's the content of that rich text field with a list of our contacts that was generated through our flow. The last thing you're going to want to do is decide how you want this flow to be triggered to generate this HTML list. I created an auto-launch flow because I can trigger that from a screen flow, which could be triggered from a button, or we could trigger that from a record-triggered flow, or we could trigger that from a scheduled flow. If you know from the outset which one of these you want, you can follow the same logic that I just showed you in this video, but just build it directly into that flow, or you can run our auto-launch flow as a subflow of any of those. There are a ton of great use cases for being able to email people data from a related list. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please click like and click subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.